This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game, shifting a little money here, a little there, hoping it all works out? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can be a better budgeter and potentially lower your insurance bill too. You tell Progressive what you want to pay for car insurance. They'll help you find options within your budget. Try it today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in places that could expose you to identity theft. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, their US-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Let's get one thing straight. I would not call Slate's culture critic, Sam Adams, a fan of Saturday Night Live. When I asked him if he's been watching this season, he answered like this.
I have watched most of it, but I have watched it in fits and starts, I guess.
Would you have been watching as much if it wasn't a presidential election season?
I mean, I was definitely watching more because of the election, although frankly, it's mainly because it's my job to keep an eye on the sort of nexus of politics and popular culture, and not because I'm looking to Saturday Night Live for particularly keen insights into where the politics of the nation is heading.
Sick burn, Sam.
Yes. SNL really approaches politics as celebrity, not as a matter of, positions or where the country is going, but just sort of, the weird things about how these funny, awkward public people act.
Sam is not saying SNL isn't powerful. Quite the opposite. Some of their impressions have really endured. When I picture former vice presidential candidate Sarah Palin, sometimes I'm pretty sure I'm actually imagining Tina Fey. When I remember Vice President Al Gore, I can hear the slowed down cadence that SNL made famous. This year, the show had a new challenge, making a presidential race that felt existentially important to so many hilarious. The challenge was doubly hard because plenty of viewers felt like the show messed it up 8 years back after Hillary Clinton lost.
Truly one of the most, painful and cringy pop culture moments in recent memory for me was the way SNL responded to the 2016 election, having Kate McKinnon's Hillary Clinton come out in her white pantsuit and sit at the piano and play Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah. It just felt so maudlin and exactly the kind of thing that the other side would like. This is what they point to. Say, this is what they're like.
They would make fun of us for this.
Yes. I really was dreading this weekend's episode. In fact, would not have watched it if you had not asked me to come on and talk about it.
Maybe you watched this weekend's show, too. To me, it traveled this journey, starting with four cast members looking straight to camera, earnestly explaining the stakes of Donald Trump's reelection.
On Tuesday, Americans went to the polls and elected Donald Trump to be the next president of the United States.
To many people, including many people watching this show right now, the results were shocking and even horrifying.
It felt like 2016 all over again.
And now, thanks to the Supreme Court, there are no guardrails.
Nothing to protect the people who are brave enough to speak out against him.
Then the sketch turned.
And that is why we at SNL would like to say to Donald Trump, we have been with you all along.
We have never...
The cold open was followed by a monologue from Bill Burr, who joked about Asian people spreading the flu and told women politicians they just needed to be a little sexier. Sam did not love the monologue, but that skit, he found it compelling.
I think it is in channeling kind of the things that normal viewers are feeling. I feel like that's where, Saturday Night Live sort of becomes useful to me.
Yeah, it's funny you liked that cold open because to me, it felt like the show was jumbled this weekend. Like it felt like a grab bag of different performative reactions you could have to a Trump reelection. And it seemed like the show was refusing to choose a lane to me. Does that mean SNL's not up to the task of dealing with Trump 2.0?
I mean, I don't think they are, but I think it's very hard to say anything about Donald Trump that he kind of doesn't say about himself. I think I could run off a list of all the things I find, bad or abhorrent about him. And a lot, a certain number of people who voted for him would listen to that list and go, yep, that's what I like about him. So at that point, like, satire no longer functions if you're pointing out what seem to be these self-evidently terrible things about him that other people are just like, yeah, that's great.
Today on the show, Saturday Night Live has been on the air for half a century. Can it keep the laughs going once Donald Trump returns to office? I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around. This show is brought to you by Discover. Have you heard about Doublenomics? It's okay if you haven't. It's extremely niche and practiced by Discover. Here's an example. Discover automatically doubles the cash back earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cashback Match. That means with Discover, you could turn $150 cash back into $300. It pays to Discover. See terms at discover.com/creditcard. This episode is brought to you by Saks.com. There is joy in finding the perfect gift for the ones you love, but it can be a challenge. Saks.com's holiday gift guide makes it easy. Whether you are surprising your hard-to-shop-for sister with a Chloe bracelet bag or gifting your partner a memorable scent from Gucci. At Saks.com, there is holiday inspiration for every personality on your list. If you go to their website, there is even a tab specifically for gifts where you can hunt for the perfect item for the pickiest shopper in your life, from Prada sneakers to Gucci lipstick. Saks.com's handpicked guide can help take the stress out of the holidays. And don't forget about yourself. You can add instant cheer to your home with some bright decor or bundle up in a scarf coat from Totem to stay warm all season long. Find gifts guaranteed to bring joy to everyone this holiday season at Saks.com. That is Saks.com for the ultimate holiday gift guide and all the shopping inspiration you need. I know you've been reading about the history of SNL, so I'm sort of curious. How did the show start? And back then, what was its mission? Like, was it interested in skewering politics from the beginning?
I mean, I think there's been an interest in skewering politics. I mean, they definitely saw themselves as part of a certain strain of the counterculture in the 1970s. I mean, it wasn't the 1960s counterculture. It was a sort of a different reaction to that. But they certainly saw themselves as the first generation to grow up on TV and then make TV. So they really were intent on doing something different, but it wasn't conventionally or obviously political in a lot of ways. I mean, Chevy Chase made himself a star right off doing his sort of famous impression of Gerald Ford as a sort of comically inept bumbler who would just, go up to change a light bulb and, fall off a ladder.
I do have two major announcements to make. Whoop, uh-oh. No problem.
And that, I think, was the level of the satire on SNL for a long time. There is something to just deflating powerful figures and bringing them down to earth. That can be a valuable tool, but it's not satire. The revolution is not going to start from pointing out that Gerald Ford is a goofball.
Yeah, I've been thinking about how I've become so used to modern day SNL cast members using costumes and patterns of speech to mock politicians. Like James Austin Johnson, who plays Trump on SNL right now, his whole thing is being an impressionist. Like at one point he appeared on Weekend Update doing absurd vocal imitations, like not just of Trump, but Bob Dylan and Jay-Z.
Look, I gotta get these impressions out, okay? It's my brand, all right? Bartenders won't even look at me at the after party unless I do my Trump voice. We've been waiting a very long time for that Negroni. This is much too long. It's a 3-ingredient drink.
And when he started playing Trump on the show, they gave him this makeup so his neck was saggy in the middle, like Trump's is in real life. And that doesn't seem like the approach SNL's always taken. It's not been about like parroting or looking the most like or sounding the most like. It's been about something different.
Yeah, it's gone back and forth, but certainly if you think of like Will Ferrell's George W. Bush, which I think is one of the most enduring, political impressions of my lifetime.
It seems to me that no one has needed a helping hand more than former President Bill Clinton. Accordingly, I ordered a surprise military strike against Iraq in order to move his latest scandals off the front pages.
It's easier for me to think of Will Ferrell's Bush than it is to think of the real Bush.
Why do you say that?
I don't even know if it's really just the impression of him. It's that sort of strategery thing, that sort of soft voice, kind of perpetually scattered. Again, sort of a bumbler.
We are almost out of time, so I will instead ask each candidate to sum up in a single word the best argument for his candidacy. Governor Bush?
Strategery.
And Ferrell and Adam McKay, who wrote a lot of the sketches for him and is now sort of way over on the political left, they've sort of expressed doubt in a way that maybe we made him seem too likable. We made him this kind of affable bumbler and not the genuinely pernicious political force that he was. But I do think that they've created characterizations over the years that have really stuck.
Their impressions have been both funny and powerful in the past. Like you talk about their impressions as kind of consolidating a version of someone in people's minds.
The way that SNL has traditionally talked about impressions overall, not just political impressions, is they use the phrase handles a lot, which is sort of a comedy term.
Handles?
Yes. And it's like if you're looking at somebody, a public figure, and trying to figure out how to do them as an impressionist, you're looking for handles, which is the voice, mannerisms, turns of phrase, but it's often sort of more than that. It's like, what are the building blocks that you're going to make that impression?
The things you grab onto.
Yes. So if you look at, for example, like Dana Carvey's Biden that we saw a lot of this year, it's stuff like, guess what? And by the way, and, numbered bullet pointed list of things where he starts at 2 and then loses his point.
And guess what? And by the way, the fact of the matter is, no joke, this is serious right now. I mean, it's serious. Anyway, in conclusion, me and Vice President Harris are the same.
Oh, okay. Great stuff. Thank you, Joe.
Like it's those are kind of the repeated, really memes of that impression. So they look for those little repeated bits that can turn a character into a caricature.
Yeah, it just strengthens the impression. And that had a real effect when it came to Sarah Palin. To, I think, Sarah Palin's detriment, is it worth talking about why that impression did more than just dull the edges of someone and launder them and made them something laughable?
I mean, the Sarah Palin impression in particular, there was this extraordinary physical resemblance. It's one of those things where it just felt like the nation just decided, like, as a body, that Tina Fey had to do Sarah Palin. So there was that part of it.
Hillary and I don't agree on everything.
I believe that diplomacy should be the cornerstone of any foreign policy.
And I can see Russia from my house.
But it's also just because, Palin was a joke. There was so little to her. She was somebody that nobody knew anything about before she was suddenly elevated onto the national stage. So there was no previously existing idea of her to be contradicted by the SNL impression. That was probably the first glimpse that most people were sort of quote unquote getting of her. I think maybe more people saw her on SNL than saw her on CNN at the beginning. So it really kind of set in stone who people thought she was. And she didn't, frankly, do all that much to dissuade it.
That's a good point, though, that Sarah Palin sort of burst onto the public stage. And so it was really a race for Sarah Palin to set her own terms of who she was versus SNL and Tina Fey. And it feels like SNL and Tina Fey kind of won, whereas Trump has been so ever present for so long that SNL was like racing to keep up with him as a character and could only pantomime what existed already. They couldn't set the terms in the same way.
Right. And it is, this has been said a million times over the last 8 years, but just looking at, the kind of cabinet decisions that are being announced this week for the forthcoming Trump administration, like Elon Musk is going to head a commission on government efficiency. Like that's a joke. the fact that it's real doesn't change that fact. But like, what joke would you make about that? Humor sort of pales beside the reality of it. And, you know, Trump himself is like that too. Like so many of what were laugh lines in the kind of recent SNL sketches about Trump, his campaign speeches, and they really only depicted him on the stump this year. I think they made an important course correction and not sort of showing him as a regular guy when he was off stage. It was really only about his sort of public appearances. But, you know, some of the sort of biggest laugh lines, so to speak, in the SNL versions of the speeches were just real things that they transcribed.
You said there was one skit basically this year where you felt like the show grew baby teeth. It was when SNL parodied Kamala Harris's Fox News interview. Why did this skit work better for you?
Well, because I think that's one of those moments, you know, Kamala went on Fox News into the Lion's Den to do this interview and got this incredibly, you know, I would say comically, not in a laughing way, but this comically hostile reception from Brett Baer, where she just couldn't get through half a sentence without him interrupting her.
Brett, let's just get to the point, okay? The point is that we have a broken immigration system that needs to be repaired.
So your Homeland Security Secretary said that 85% of apprehensions.
I'm not finished. We have
it's a
an
rough estimate of
system
6 million people have been released.
You know, if you watch that by yourself, you're kind of looking for someone next to you to go, are you seeing the same thing I'm seeing? Like, this is ridiculous, right? And so SNL kind of, you know, came in and, again, just turned up the volume like a notch or something. The actual thing was so absurd that there wasn't so much they needed to do to exaggerate it, but they just kind of reaffirmed that.
They underlined it. They were like, yes, this is ridiculous.
Yes, this is exactly as much of a joke as you thought it was.
Okay, the first thing we did in office was to introduce a bill.
10 million, give me a number.
Brett, we came up with a bipartisan
But
bill.
didn't have a number, though.
May I please finish?
I'm asking you to.
Well, then you have to listen.
Well, I can't because I'm talking.
Well, when will you stop?
I want to talk about one more skit, which was the skit that ran the weekend before the election, where Maya Rudolph's impression of Kamala Harris came face to face with Kamala Harris herself. At the time when I saw it, I found this skit uncommonly sweet.
Yeah.
It clearly hit on something because the right hollered about it afterwards and demanded equal airtime for Donald Trump, which he got. And at the time you wrote about it, you said it was effective and interesting. And you had this line, in a day or a week, the moment might feel like the last huff of hopium, a clutch of blue state elites clapping for their own right-headedness. And I read that this week and I was like, whew, Sam really called it, huh?
I did think that sketch was sweet and emotional. I think it really got at something. There's a moment in there where Maya Rudolph's Kamala says, you know, if only there was someone I could talk to about what I'm going through, or some other Black South Asian woman, preferably from the Bay Area.
It is nice to see you, Kamala.
It is nice to see you, Kamala, and I'm just here to remind you, you got this.
You know, and it was, you know, she's setting up the fact that Kamala was going to be on the other side of this fake stage mirror, but it was also underlining for me, like, just what a singular figure she is in public life. There's never been a presidential candidate like her. There really is no one she could look to for an example of how to do things. And I thought it got at that in a sort of weirdly poignant way.
It struck me that SNL and the Kamala Harris campaign kind of shared something in this skit, like a sense of their own rightness and a sense that, I don't know, a sense of superiority, maybe, I think is how others might perceive it. People who didn't vote for Kamala Harris.
I think, you know, they would kind of perceive it that way. And in fact, do seem to perceive it that way, regardless of what, you know, Harris voters may or may not do. It is sort of baked in at this point. But it was interesting later in that episode, there was a joke on Weekend Update that Colin Jost had where he said, well, the presidential election's coming up on Tuesday, and this election will determine whether Kamala Harris becomes the next president of the United States or whether everyone at SNL gets audited.
That one stuck with me, too. Do you think that fear is real for people at SNL?
You know, everybody's in a very weird place. And I think there is, you know, probably true for them as well. I don't know. You know, I think the cold open this week is probably playing up for comic effect. Their fear of direct retaliation as far as like, the show itself being a target. It's part of NBC Universal. I think they're probably pretty safe as a corporate institution, but it did strike me that while there are, numerous straight white men in the cast of SNL at the moment, the 4 people who were in that first shot weren't. You had queer, women, performers of color in that opening shot, and it was just a little sort of subtle, like, these are people who are actually personally have reason to feel more vulnerable now than they did a week ago.
So what should Saturday Night Live do during a second Trump term? This show is brought to you by Discover. Have you heard about Doublenomics? It's okay if you haven't. It's extremely niche and practiced by Discover. Here's an example. Discover automatically doubles the cash back earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cashback Match. That means with Discover, you could turn $150 cash back into $300. It pays to Discover. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in places that could expose you to identity theft. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, their US-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
When I look back in time, and I know hindsight is 2020, I sort of wonder if SNL would have been better served this election season, not by repeating back amped up versions of what was happening each week at rallies and on TV, or maybe doing that, but doing something more, like projecting forward into the future, doing darkly comic takes on what a mass deportation might look like, or government bureaucrats being fired en masse, or the U.S. pulling out of NATO. I mean, funnier people than me will have ideas here. But I was like, is that actually something that might have hit or worked?
Yeah, it's very hard to say. I mean, yeah, I'm thinking like, would you do a sketch about like, I don't know, the National Institutes of Health after Robert Kennedy has fired 600 people and there's like one guy left answering the phone?
It's just Kennedy with a pipette.
Yes. Kennedy and his brainworm, like manning the phone banks or something. I don't know.
You're pretty good at this, Sam.
I was going way back to thinking of how the comic strip Doonesbury represented Dan Quayle in the first Bush administration, where they just drew him as...
He was a feather, right?
Yeah, he was just a feather floating in the air. And it was a joke about his, his insubstantialness.
But it wasn't a caricature.
But it was also just like, I don't want to draw him. And I feel like in a way, if SNL just represented Trump as, I don't know, like a pumpkin on a stick, or as a guy who's always in the next room or something like that. I mean, I think that would be more powerful and better than just, having some guy come out and make fun of the way he talks every week. I think that doesn't feel like it accomplishes anything to me at this point. If Saturday Night Live has a role to play, and that's a big if, whether they do, whether they should, but I think if they have any sort of usefulness, it will be just kind of aid and comfort and telling us all that we're not nuts.
It strikes me too that we could be in for like an era of wild experimentation on SNL. And I say that because Israel has a show that's often called their SNL. It translates as A Wonderful Country. They do sketch comedy. And they've done things over the last few years when they've been led by Benjamin Netanyahu, who has a lot of similarities to Trump, that have really worked and really not worked. Like after some hostages were released after October 7th, they had child hostages on the show in sketches. Like they have a regular occurring cabbie character who like picked them up in the cab and talked to them and was like, you were my favorite hostage. And people were like, oh, I don't know if that worked. But at the same time, it feels like, I just wonder what the experimentation would look like on their end.
It would be interesting to see that happen. I think I'm probably skeptical about that as well. I mean, SNL is very much an institution of American life. They're in the middle of their 50th season. Institutions, I think, are by their nature small c conservative. They are not given to radical change. Lorne Michaels has very successfully steered the ship through really kind of unimaginable cultural changes and kept the show popular and relevant, whatever that means. So, I think they've certainly changed who writes on the show and who performs in front of the camera. And I think that has really given the show a lot of strength and sort of fresh perspectives.
But are you saying that the institutional point of view is still adjacent to power and that limits things?
I think they have a thing that works. They have a process that works, which involves people staying up till 4 a.m. Tuesday night writing sketches. And they've been doing that for 50 years. And they're not, as many strides as our culture has made towards work-life balance, SNL is not inclined to reflect that. I think they're going to keep doing what they've been doing.
But that process has also done some things that I think are very controversial. They had Donald Trump host the show. When he was, in 2015, they had Elon Musk host the show. These are people who are about to be center stage, incredibly controversial. And you could argue that SNL served them up on a platter.
Right. It was funny to watch that cold open this week, and the two impressions in it are Donald Trump and Elon Musk, both of whom are past hosts of the show and both of whom have been, and this term gets overused a lot, but I think it is fair to say normalized by those appearances. You give somebody a chance to just kind of be on stage and look like a good guy who can take a joke, and that really humanizes people in a certain way. I think that Kamala Harris's appearance last week did the same thing. So they do institutionally bear some of that responsibility, and it does seem in a way like they're trying to make up for that now. I'm not sure. I mean, the horses obviously kind of left the barn at this point, and I think both Trump and Musk are beyond the stage where anything SNL does is going to make a dent in their hide. But they can at least, stand up for some kind of truthful vision of the world and continue to depict these people as the buffoons that they are, even as they have enormously consequential amounts of power at their disposal.
Yeah. I mean, and obviously we're putting a lot on SNL's shoulder.
Yeah.
A lot happened in this election. We cannot blame one late night show for whatever happened. And I don't even think that's in their power. But I think that's a good point. It'll be interesting to me to see where the show identifies power now and who becomes important for them to be close to. Like, are you having AOC host the show now? Like, what are they doing next that reveals how they think of their place in the culture and what's emerging at this moment?
Right. It'll be interesting to see, because there has been, and it's obviously very, very early days now, but there's been some reporting on this. And I am feeling the tendency as well to people sort of turn inward, to go into lifestyle pursuits instead of, reporting on politics so much. I am feeling the urge to buy flannel shirts and cozy socks. I get it. I have a teenage daughter. It's been, 2 of the 3 elections that she's sort of been consciously aware of have been Donald Trump beating a more qualified woman. And it's, it's hard for me, but I think this is her view of the world is really being solidified right now. But, one of the things we've been doing, she'll be watching TikTok and the Domingo sketch from SNL from a few weeks ago, where they're all singing a song to Sabrina Carpenter's Espresso. That'll come on, and we'll just start kind of doing it together.
With the hot guy, but he looks gay. Heard his name's Domingo. Second location, maybe he's bi, still dancing with Domingo. Third location, fully straight, fully touching Domingo.
And that's just a moment of joyfulness.
Total escape. Nothing to do with politics.
No, and so I think that escape is important, and I wouldn't say it's political, but it's part of just giving yourself the energy to get out of bed and go through another day. And so is SNL going to do that? Are they going to just take a step back and just be a place to feel okay and laugh at silly stuff? Or are they going to, really try to kind of fight back in whatever way they're capable of? The show is not one entity. It's not written by one person or acted by, one person. So they will probably do all of that at once. But it will be interesting to see both where the balance goes and what works.
Sam, I'm really grateful for your time. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mary.
Sam Adams is a senior editor and culture writer for Slate. And that's our show. Just a reminder that until the end of this month, we are teaming up with Slate Politics to bring you The Surge. It's a Friday roundup of the week's biggest political news, and there's a whole lot of that these days. Me and Jim Newell unpack what the heck is happening as we rocket towards a second Trump presidency. It's kind of like grabbing a drink with your nerdiest Washington friends, but we're funny, and who doesn't need a drink right now? Here's the catch. If you want to hear The Surge, you gotta join Slate Plus. It's a great chance to support journalists you rely on day in and day out to put the news in context. More good news, you can subscribe now on Apple Podcasts by clicking Try Free at the top of the What Next page, or visit slate.com/whatnextplus to get access wherever you listen. The Surge is available for you to listen to every Friday after lunch. I'll catch you there. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, and Madeline Ducharme. We are led by Alicia Montgomery. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. You can go track me down on Blue Sky if you want. I am Mary Harris. Super simple. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you back here next time.